Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to my wonderful 139 subscribers. Quick little video here. Particularly shout out to Chris from the We Love Comics, who I received a comic from him 2 days ago and was asking me if it was going to take me another 6 months to make a video. Well, no, Chris, here's your video. So, shout outs: Barbarian Kung Fu, Dope Comics, Chance Acting Demo, Nostalgic Pod Blast, Al Hardy, and all my other friends out there. I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, I have begun a process that I have talked about for a while now, where my personal philosophy is not that he who dies with the most comic books wins. As I've discussed, my wife and my daughter know very little about comics. Certainly, if it's some nuanced thing like this is the first mention of vibranium, this is the first appearance of Atumna, they're not going to know the significance. I also had an experience, probably been about 5 years ago. I was with my good friend Chance, and a relative has 57,000 comics. At the time, there was a financial situation, so my friend Chance and I were tasked with flipping through books to try to find some key value books, which he has, and pull some of those out to help with the finances that were needed at the time to get him from point A to point B financially, as some other things were in the works. But anyway, at that time I realized, I started doing the math, that I was like, well, if I can't remember now exactly, but it was like, if we sold 200 comic books a month out of this guy's collection, it was literally going to take like 27 years to sell the entire collection. There's only so many avenues that you have if you're looking to sell a comic book. You can sell them to a dealer at a comic con. And I want to preface this that you have to realize that everybody is going to take a cut. If you have a key, super mega valuable key grail, or a number of them, and you're going to go to like an auction house like Heritage Auctions, they are going to take a cut. Now, not only for purchasers buying things on eBay, we're paying tax, which to me, on an item that has already been taxed at one point, is whatever. That's a discussion for another time. But also, they charge sellers fees. Another thing to be aware of: if you use eBay as an outlet, as a seller, last year, 2024, you could sell up to, I think it was like 5,200 something. It was a little bit over 5,000 before you had to report that income to the IRS. Something I have found out is, and of course this would be really hard to prove, because when you bought a comic book, how much you paid for that comic book. But if it's a collectible that you have owned over a year, the IRS charges 28%. 28%. That's a lot. Once again, it would be really, really hard to prove. When did I buy this comic book? Like, it's not like most dealers are giving you receipts at a show. A lot of times, even local comic book shops, depending on if you pay with cash or credit card, they might not even be giving you a receipt. Especially sometimes at local comic shops, you might get a discount for paying cash, because now they're not paying a premium on the use of the credit card machine. So everybody's getting a cut. However, back to my point, for 2024, you could sell, I think it was like $5,200 before you had to report that income to the IRS. This year, 2025, they have cut that in half to $2,500. Next year, 2026, excuse me, everybody, my nose is just running here. I don't know why. Give me 1 second. I'm back. In 2026, that amount goes down to $600. If you exceed $600 in sales on eBay in 2026, that income is now taxable by the IRS. Something to be aware of. So, like I said, I have talked about this for a long time, that I have wanted to, and I have begun to start paring down my collection. I have probably sold about 130, 140 books so far. Chance, before you freak out, the collection barely has a dent in it. And I have a much smaller collection then I know for sure Chance does. Chris at the We Love Comic has. I I've never counted, but like okay, like call it I've got 6,000 comic books. Trying to sell those one by one on eBay is not the kind of life I want to lead, especially because I am not retired. To take pictures, make listings, even if I do some bundle packages, right? Of here's a lot of 80s Fantastic Fours or whatever. That's still a whole lot that I've got to take pictures of, do the listings, and then if somebody buys it, now I've got to ship it out, pay for the shipping, all that stuff, and then meanwhile, all the attendant anxiety of like, is this going to be a reasonable purchaser? Who, when they get the book, they'll be like, oh, here's this little tiny microscopic crease that I couldn't see the picture. I want 50% of my money back. I mean, there's few of those people out there, but they do exist. Of course, you have the vagaries of the mail system. We can't find your package, and of course, there's certain checks and balances in place that you can get your money back, but that's a big hassle. So just imagine your collection right now and how many comic books that you have. Try to sell those one at a time, or like even in some lots. Like that's a whole lot of work. Now, you can go up to a local comic shop, unless we're talking a key significant issue or a grail for stuff that I'm not even going to count, like say anything from 1990 to now. Even 80s comic books, even from the early 80s, you are going to be lucky if you get anywhere from 25 cents to $1 a piece. The reasoning behind that is, how long does that book sit in a long box in their shop before they recoup that money? So even if you show up there with 1,000 comic books, unless you're including some keys in there, so say you show up with 1,000 comic books, and they give you $1 a piece, that's $1,000. Are they going to want to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years for somebody to come flipping through to, oh, this is the one I need, this is the one I want, to get that $1,000 back, much less making some kind of profit on it? No. If you include a couple key issues where they're like, oh, okay, well, here's this ASM 129, for example, where they go, okay, well, cool, I can at least flip that and get some money and make some profit. So you might be able to negotiate something that way. But once again, for books from the 80s, I mean, even if you're talking Marvel Silver Age stuff, with the time it's going to take them to sell those, once again, if I'm not talking key issues, just like say generic Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos run, even if it's 12-cent price tag, Silver Age stuff, mostly you're not going to get a whole lot of money for it. I mean, there's certain, because they might be able to sell them for, say, depending on the condition and all that stuff, they might be getting 5, 8, maybe 10, 12 bucks a piece on it. Once again, how long do they want to sit on that before they get that money back? I reached out to some larger YouTube comic channels. One of them was pretty much just like, yeah, I'll buy your books, but basically he's wanting like key issues, first appearances, #1 issues. And at that point I was like, do I need to pay you a percentage for me to sell a key book? At that point, if I'm not talking thousands of comic books, but I'm talking 10, 15, 20, 30 comic books, maybe selling those one at a time on eBay, where other than the eBay seller's fee, where they're dinging me that way, I'm probably going to come out a little bit better than selling, say, those same 20 books to one individual, because they're probably going to take somewhere 30 to 40%. That's kind of standard. That's pretty much where you're at. If you go to a comic book con and those same 20 books, they're probably going to be looking to make about 30 to 50, 30, 40, 50% profit, depending. So I was like, well, I don't need to go through you to sell an ASM 129 or a Conan #1 or Tomb of Dracula #1. I can list it on eBay, and there's other things that I've not explored, like Facebook Marketplace or Instagram or whatever. So maybe people that have had those experiences, you can chime in on, where you getting dinged that way. You know, how are they? What cut are they taking? I mean, heck, even when you got people that pay you on PayPal, PayPal takes a cut. They take a percentage. So everybody's going to get a little piece of the pie. So you got to be aware of that up front. So back to paring down my collection. Chris from We Love Comics had said something very savvy as people watch him get, a Hulk 1 or Fantastic Four #1 or some, things along those lines were super key issues. And basically what he did was he worked his way up the food chain. That's sort of where I'm at. I've got a couple of governing rules. And I'm going to get off my face for a sec, just to show you guys comic book. Of governing principles. Here you go, Dope Comics. I actually got a second copy of this. Better grade. What was that? So yeah. So basically where I can use the hobby to fund the hobby. As opposed to having to save up the money from paychecks or the monthly budget to afford $1,000 comic book, a $1,500 comic book, or things along that like. What I'm doing is I'm going through like this. I got 2 copies of it. I've got a couple of governing principles. I'm not selling any of my graded books. I'm not selling any of my first appearances or #1 issues. A little bit of caveat on #1 issues, like, my Devil Dinosaur #1, my Omega #1, things along that lines. I can't remember, like Daredevil, what number it is, number 13 or something, first mention of vibranium. I'm okay about letting that stuff go. First appearance of Apocalypse, I'm okay about letting that stuff go. But if it's like a major character, like a Kitty Pryde, first appearance of Phoenix, X-Men 101, now I'm holding on to that stuff right now. But I'm culling the collection. So I'm not selling key issues, I'm not selling #1s, I'm not selling first appearances, or things I'm emotionally attached to. There's some books that I have very fond memories of going with my friend Chance, and or just myself out in the wild where oh man, here's the first appearance of the Falcon. They're asking $6 for this comic book. I got it graded, came back at 6.0. Just having that book to remind me of the story, that is worth it to me to hold on to those, even if it's like I said, just something like I fondly remember, like me and my older brother when we were kids, that certain covers that I have just memories, and I've held on to these books for so long. Now back to holding on to books for so long. So I ask myself the question when it comes to some of these things, like, if I got a book from the 70s, and I'll make an example, that say it's worth $40 now. The chances of that book being worth, say, $150 or $200 10 years from now is really, really slim. However, key early appearances of major title characters, Thor and Journey of the Mystery, Hulk, obviously, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Daredevil, Doctor Strange, you guys know the list. Those are always going to appreciate. I mean, your money is pretty safe there. Now, if you overspend, we'll know. If the comic book is, say, now worth $800 and you buy it for $1,200, yeah, it's going to take you a long time to make some money on that. But if you're patient and you look for deals and ask for deals, that stuff is out there. And my thought is, now I'm not pulling $1,000 out of the bank account to get this key issue. I'm not only funding the purchase of books from the sale of books, that is also paying my shipping costs, my packaging costs, me getting all the books that I am selling in new bags and boards. None of that is coming out of pocket. I've actually, always the deal I have with my wife, that she doesn't even demand or anything. I just do it, is I always take 30% of sales of my comic books and put it into savings or towards household stuff. I figure that's fair. Because a lot of this money, what was books that me and my wife, we've been together over 17 years. So a lot of these books I acquired with like group finances and have now been sitting on for a decade. So I think it's only fair that she gets some money out of that. Having said that, I am going to flip the screen back to me for a sec. I have found so far with the books that I am selling, I'm pretty much making between triple the amount that I have in the book up to about 5 times the amount that I have in the book. So I'm doing really well. Because, I mean, and some of these things, it's like, yeah, I've had them so long that, I paid $1 for it and I get $8 to $15. That's a good return. And so I'm pretty much finding that that's my experience. So the first number of books that I sold after I put some money in the savings, I had this book on layaway from Chris. And look, this very kind note that he put, thank you as always for being a man of your word. Enjoy this awesome comic. Sincerely, Chris at We Love Comics. Such a nice touch. He's really a classy guy. I urge anyone to, if you see that he's doing a live auction, to check that stuff out, because he's always going to work in a little bit of profit from you for you. He does not charge tax. Depending on the cost of the book that you're purchasing, he'll offer something, a 2-month payment plan, a 4-month payment plan, a 6-month payment plan. And that's what I was on with this comic book, that I didn't have all the funds up front, and so I was able to utilize the 6-month layaway plan. I sold some comic books. I still owed I'll call it $370. So my first order of business was, I'm going to pay my debts. So the first comic I have been able to acquire with funds from sales from my collection is this copy of Batman number 181, the first appearance of Poison Ivy. This is graded a 3.5. But it's certainly, and it's been my experience, I mean, yeah, key issues, would everybody like a 9? Sure. Does everybody have the money to pay for a 9.0 of this? No. So a lot of times the lower grade books are easier to flip because you have a wider demographic of people that can actually afford the purchase. I'm going to get this out of the bag, throw another comic book up there just so you're not looking at my room. But this is very much a book that, I'm not like a huge, I must love Poison Ivy. She's so awesome. This is funny. Chris always, not always, but depending on the cost of the book, includes a bonus comic. This is actually one of the ones I sold in the very first batch of comics that I did. I'll give him a shout out at James at Mint Hunter Comics. The reason I went with him, he actually did a sort of calling all cars on his channel where he's like, hey, I'm looking for, Marvel Silver Age, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that. I'm looking for specific, Thor Under the Journey into Mystery title, not Thor. I'm looking for X-Men, anything from issue 1 to 150. He was actually looking for Venom Lethal Protector, and I sold him number 1, this one number 2, and number 5. I sold, I can't remember the issue number right now, the X-Men that's got Wolverine on that X-shaped cross that had that brief little scene in the Wolverine Deadpool movie. I had 2 really nice copies of that. Newer books, as far as I'm concerned, most of the ones I sold to him, I actually got when I was working at Goodwill. I paid almost nothing for them. And his offer was $300. And this was for 11 comic books. And honestly, they weren't anything major because I was sort of testing the waters with this guy to make sure he was as advertised, that there wasn't going to be any hiccups. And so, yeah. So I'll probably sell this one to James because he's looking for stuff like that. And that's one thing I also liked about James is, I don't want to say he'd buy just anything, but I've watched enough of his claim sales where it's everything from Golden Age to Silver Age and on up. Modern books, variant covers and stuff like that. And that kind of appeals to me because I just have a lot of generic comic books in the collection. But a book like this, I'm not, invested emotionally in Poison Ivy, but certainly it is a major character. It is a major first appearance. So my thought is, as I'm beginning to get books like this, and I've got another significant one on the way. Um, uh, I don't want to say anything more about it. It is a very significant issue. I reached out to multiple sellers. I got a very good deal on it. But a book like that one and this one, or things along this caliber, as I watch them appreciate, now when we're talking 5, 6, 7 years up the road, as opposed to my example about here's a comic book that's worth $40 now, and you'd be lucky, like really honestly, if in 10 years you would even double that. It'd even be worth 80. But for what I paid for this, in a couple years, I would have no problem flipping this book and making a couple hundred, much less getting all my money back. So when we're talking a couple years from now, I can take a book like this, the one that I've got on the way, other ones that I have in my collection, they're not super mega grails as far as I'm concerned, that I can sell them individually. I can make a trade, because one day I want to have at least one of the three, if not all three. A Fantastic Four #1, but like a 3 point something of that, that's like a $20,000 book. A Hulk 1, an Amazing Spider-Man 1, we're talking big, big money. Back to my... So that's a part of my tactic as well, is not, selling the books that it would take for me to come up with, like, say, 10 grand. I could do it. But as opposed to laying all my chips on this $10,000 book, my thinking is along the lines of this $800 book. This early, not #1 Spider-Man, but issue 3, issue 4, issue 5, issue 6, issue 7. There's a lot of key stuff in there. First appearance of Dr. Octopus, Doctor Doom first crossover, first appearance of the Lizard. These are always going to be sought after books. But as opposed to the money that I'd have to liquidate now to get ASM 1, I can get books along those lines, as opposed to X-Men 1, X-Men 2, X-Men 3, X-Men 4, first appearance of Scarlet Witch. And as I said, use those at some point to sell those books, then get a huge chunk of change, and then I can go, okay, cool, $10,000 book, here I come. I'm coming for you. Coming for you, X-Men #1. I'm coming for you, Hulk #1. And have those kind of books in my collection. And I know, like, there's people out there that the thought of selling a single comic book from their collection just makes their skin crawl. I get it. And it was sort of difficult for me, is like to let go of some of this stuff. But I've always felt that I'm a caretaker of these books, and I've kept them safe for the person who's going to love it. That is wow, this is the book I've been looking for. Here's the first appearance of Jubilee. Strangely, I have like 3 copies that I, don't know why. Or Venom Lethal Protector. Like, I'm pumped, and much less some Silver Age stuff, just random things, or early, like Thor, early, Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, whatever, stuff from the 70s, like early Defenders comic books, or the Invaders, or things like that, that somebody else is going to love these books and hopefully take care of them as much as I have, but it's time for me to let some of this stuff go. And where it gets hard, I'm like, okay, I'm not selling you. If I really have to second guess, go like, oh, am I really ready to let, this Strange Tales issue, am I really ready to let this one go? Then I'm like, well, no, I'm not doing it. No one, I'm not desperate for funds. I'm not desperate for finances. So I'm doing this because I choose to do it. But when I can get a book like this, Batman 181, the book that's on the way, and I still have funds in PayPal from sales that I'm building up for some other stuff I'm looking at, and I'm really, really excited about that. So I'll keep you guys aware, about this journey that I'm on, and leave some comments. If you're like, you're selling comics, how dare you? What are you thinking? Have you lost your mind? Or if you can sort of see the wisdom in what I'm doing of, you know, look, if you got thousands of comic books and, you know, once again, make another mathematical example. Say you've got comic books that you spent $1 to $2 a piece on, and you've now had them for 30, 40 years, right? 25 years. And you can now sell those books for $5, $8, $10 a piece. It doesn't take a whole lot of those. So also now you've got some decent purchasing power. So just something to think about. But leave me a comment. I'm getting I'm getting somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes. That's sort of how I like to keep my videos. Dope comics. I hope you like the Godzilla and the Chamber of Darkness and stuff like that. I just wanted some books to show. There's some stuff I had just laying on my table. Everybody enjoy comics. Enjoy comic book collecting. Don't let anybody tell you that what you choose to do with your comic book collection is wrong. If you never want to sell a comic book, don't do it. If you want to leave them all to your grandson, do it. If you want to build a Viking funeral pyre and get burned on top of your comic books, that's your choice to make. You spent the money to get them. You spent the time to get them. And certainly that's not what I want the outcome for my comic collection to be. You can make that choice. If you want to sell all of your books at once and I'm just cashing out. I want to take the wife on a Caribbean cruise. That's okay. I'm going to cash out my entire collection and buy a car. That's fine. Do whatever you want. It's your collection. So don't let people bring you down and sit there and tell you that what you're doing is wrong. As long as it makes you happy and you're not doing anything illegal, it's not anybody else's, really, it's not their final say. They can give some advice or some guidance. A lot that Chris was saying resonated with me, where I was watching him get these huge books, and he's like, look, I've seen him do auctions. And I remember, I've been watching the channel long enough, where it's like, I remember 5, 6, 7 years ago, okay, he bought this book for, it doesn't matter, $150, $200, $250, where now the fair market value on that is $800 or $1,000 or whatever. And so he's selling those books, and then once again, very quickly, he's got enough money that he can get a Hulk 1. He can get a Fantastic Four #1. His Grail book, something he's working towards, is Amazing Fantasy 15. He has enough that, if he really wanted to pull the trigger on that, it wouldn't even dent his collection. He's got so many books graded, so many multiple copies of key books graded, that if he made that decision today, he could have that book. But like I said, there was a wisdom to it to me, and I've been like, I've got all these comic books, man, and I don't want to have to spend 25 years selling them. So what can I do to start paring the collection down to get to where I've got, it's just first appearance, #1 issue, Grail book. That's all going to be books that I'm so proud to own. I'm not selling my Daredevil #1. I'm not selling my Daredevil #2. I'm not selling my first appearance of Doctor Strange. I'm not selling my giant size X-Men 1, not now, I'm not selling my ASM 14 or 15 or 11 or 12. I'm not doing it now, but I might absolutely, a couple years down the road, take some of those books I mentioned and get a super key book. So leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Everybody, thank you for watching the Krakens Lair comics. As always, enjoy comics and enjoy comic book collecting. I'll see you guys soon.